Hi guys, welcome to Perform Better's first Q&A session. Today I've got Sophie and Paul here and we're going to talk everything long endurance events, marathons and rest and recovery. So we have Sophie here. Sophie is our social media ambassador. Sophie, you want to tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
So at the moment I'm working as a personal trainer, but my kind of background is in endurance cycling. So I used to do a lot of road racing, well, since I was kind of 10 years old. So I've got about 10 years experience, as I say, road racing. So it's long distance bike races essentially. So obviously all the endurance stuff links in.
Perfect. And Paul?
I'm an amateur runner. I run for Leamington CNAC and I've been doing so for about 25 years now.
So our first question for today is, what is your first thought when you've crossed the finish line?
Mine, if I've just done a marathon, is probably why did I do this again?
Mine would be probably get some drinks on board, get some fluid on board obviously, and probably usually a shake of some sort just to kind of get some nutrition back into the system, get the recovery process going, particularly if I've got another event either the next day or even in the afternoon afterwards.
Awesome.
I would do a similar thing as in shakes and thinking about making sure I eat some carbohydrate within an hour and a half.
So you finished the race, you've got your food and drink on board. What are the next steps, Paul?
Mine would be putting me compression wear on, making sure I get that sorted out. Can be a bit of a struggle after a marathon, you get cramps and stuff as you're trying to put it on, but I leave that on then for 24, 48 hours probably.
Sophie?
Usually it's kind of a case of having a shower, freshen up, maybe have a little bit of stretch off, but if you're at the event, normally I'll probably head home. It might take a couple of hours, and then as soon as I get home I'll try and loosen off, have a stretch, foam roller, try and mobilise a bit, particularly as I say if I've got an event the next day, need to make sure on top of the recovery, so feeling fresh.
So Paul, you said you use compression clothing. Do you want to elaborate a bit more on that?
Yeah, I just find I've been using it for about 12 years now and I just find it makes things better the next day. It doesn't necessarily get rid of all the aches and pains, but it seems to get rid of a lot of the DOMs. And you can also wear it the next day when you actually train for your recovery run because it sort of seems to give you a little bit of support.
So Sophie, you mentioned foam rolling. Is there anything you'd like to recommend, anything you suggest to people to do?
Yeah, normally, well, for events and training, I try if I can foam roller most nights. I've always struggled a little bit with my flexibility. Cycling, you're obviously sat in a bit of an unnatural position for a long period of time. Back can get a bit tight, hamstrings get tight, quads obviously get tight as you use them. So generally speaking, every night I'll try and have a good foam roller. The one I'm using at the moment is Trigger Point foam roller, which I find the best. It's nice and smooth. And I also have got a hockey ball, which I use to help get into my hips, just to release my hip flexors out, which is particularly helpful if I'm going to be doing any weight training during the week, because obviously mobility comes into it. If your hips are tight, you can't squat, etc., etc.
And I also do a bit of yoga stretches and things as well, specific to as I've got older. I think that's quite important.
Yeah.
Flexibility and the foam roller.
Obviously, the looser your muscles, generally, hopefully you're less likely to pick up any little injuries, niggles. So that's kind of why I try and keep on top of it. Obviously, it helps as well, flush that lactic acid out a little bit particularly if you've got an event again the next day.
So we've talked a lot about after the marathon. What about things that you do, any rituals you do in the build up to an event?
Making sure all my gear's clean and ready to go, and making sure that I'm as rested as I can be, and especially because in the last couple of days I tend to get a bit nervous, so I don't always sleep that well. So it'd be foam roller and everything as well to make sure that everything's as fresh as it can be for the day.
Yeah, generally speaking for me, similar type of thing. Like the week before, I'll kind of start resting up, particularly obviously the couple of days before, make sure legs are nice and fresh. Generally speaking, the day before I used to do a little bit of a easy ride type of thing, just to loosen the legs off, make sure you're not got kind of, if you've had a couple of rest days, your legs can be a bit kind of tired and fall asleep a little bit. So I just kind of wake things up, get everything moving, and then generally I'll do that, have a bit of a roller, stretch, and then it's just a case of making sure you're getting enough food on board, make sure you've got your carbs topped up, so that obviously on the following day, you're ready to go. You've got all the fuel in the tank.
When I'm doing shorter events, I've got a certain particular route that I go round, and I just go a bit faster in certain spaces to wake my legs back up to make sure that I'm ready to go on the day, that they're not too sluggish.
So just to finish off now, Paul, have you got any tips for any beginner marathon runners?
Just the hardest thing about a marathon is getting to the start line in one piece, being fit and ready to go without losing loads of training. So make sure you get your long runs in, make sure you build your training up nice and slowly. And basically, if you can't do anything else, the long runs are the most important bit, because they're the one that get you mentally prepared.
Perfect. So for any endurance event athletes, anything you'd give?
Just same as Paul said, really. Just make sure, give yourself plenty of preparation. Don't start trying to train 2 weeks before the event, because chances are you're going to struggle. Make sure you gradually build your training up. Don't go from 0 to 100, because that's when injuries kind of start to creep in, and you'll find yourself really starting to fatigue quite quickly. So just make sure you give yourself loads of prep. Make sure before the event you've got all your stuff sorted, all the equipment ready, and make sure your body's kind of fit and ready and you're nice and fresh.
And if you're training quite well and you do really feel stupidly tired and you have to duck out of a training session, it's not the end of the world. One training session doesn't it's the consistency that counts.
Yeah, I agree, definitely. If you've got a bit of a cold, bit of a niggle, give it a rest day, and you'll probably be back on it the next day. If you keep trying to train through, that's when things start to get a bit more serious, generally speaking.
Perfect. Thank you to Paul. Thank you, Sophie, for coming. That was Perform Better's Q&A session, talking about rest and recovery.